Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
Welcome back. This is episode 302. In the news this week, not a lot going on like normal. There was a few things that happened about some Masonic temples. You can check that out on Brother Chris Hodap's blog, Freemasonry for Dummies. Pretty much your source for anything that is going on in Freemasonry. I definitely urge you guys to check that out. Subscribe to that blog, even that way you're on top of anything that's wild and crazy going on in Freemasonry across the United States and the world. Secondly, recently I was invited to go to Peru to check out Machu Picchu, and I wasn't able to go. It was a real bummer. It's just I didn't have the time off for work, and it was a little bit close to make things happen. So I did the next best thing that I could, which was organize a trip. Now, the caveat and why I'm mentioning it is that I'm really looking for a philosophical retreat. There will be, I know a few guys that will be going with me. We have kind of like a cap that we have to have a minimum of 8, and we have to have a maximum, I think, of, it could be 16. I'll know more as the weeks go on. But if you find me on Facebook, if you're a friend on Facebook or whatever, you can find the event page for it, a philosophical retreat. If you want to go, go ahead and click that you're interested. And once I get all of the information available, I'll post it in there. And how are we going to handle it if everybody wants to go? Well, the issue is that we only have limited space, and it's going to be like a first pay, first gets to go thing. You're not paying me. It's the philosophical retreat. Requires 10% down if you're going to go. The estimated cost of the entire trip without your plane ticket is probably about $780. So it's still not bad. With plane ticket, you're talking about less than $1,500 for this really fun trip, which should be very enlightening and really spiritual, and maybe just a really good get-together. Now, this is open to men, women, brothers, profane. It's not like a Masons only thing. So I wanted to make sure that we mention that because it is open to anybody. And if you're interested and you don't get to go, well, then perhaps we set up a yearly thing if it's really cool. Or maybe I can get you the information to be able to set up your own retreat or help you get started with that. But it seems to be really cool, and there's a bunch of people interested in going. So it's out there. Just throwing it out there for you. Click the event that you're interested in. As I get more information, we'll see who can go and what happens. But it'll be 3 nights, 4 days, pick you up and bring you back there, and everything's all inclusive. The meals and everything are all taken care of. Everything is basically vegan stuff, so there's no meat served. So you don't have to worry about that. Everything is local, and they respect all the dietary restrictions some folks may have. And of course, there's going to be like daily meditations and yoga sessions, which will be really cool. We call it a philosophical retreat because there will be, hours in the day that we sit around and just have discussions about what we're experiencing. And if we have time, we may venture out and do a trail or two or something. Again, if you're interested, go ahead and check it out. And that's it for news. So we had a good conversation with Frater O this week, and I want to get right into that. It was going to be a discussion about Esoteric as it's featured in pop culture. So there's been a book or two written about this kind of stuff, and it bounces all over the place, and it makes some really interesting correlations and some not interesting correlations. And we did a cool episode of the Masonic Roundtable about the Masonic occult stuff that is in Doctor Strange, and our special guest was Frater O, and we talked a lot about that stuff and all the movie and everything cool in it. This episode, this conversation that we were going to have was going to be more about just kind of some of the more obscure things, and we're going to bounce around into some really interesting movies. And I guess I could mention those movies now and give you a chance to watch them, and then we can talk about them in a couple weeks. But primarily, my thoughts were going to be that we could mention movies like Legend, movies like Labyrinth, The Neverending Story, The Dark Crystal, Groundhog Day, Doctor Strange, really just touch on some of the basics. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is fantastic for this, but also The movie does not do the books justice at all. While the movie is great, it introduces you into the concept of what the league is, but the books is far more occult and spans generations in time. And I think those books are really kind of interesting. And now, of course, that's because, it's Alan Moore, who is, by acclamation an occultist or a practitioner in the secrets. So give yourself a chance. Go watch those movies. Look for the Masonic influences that you might see. Write them down or just make a mental note, and we'll talk about them in a couple weeks. But what did we find that we needed to replace this week's subject with? And that was, of course, the subject of esoterics. But we had some interesting comments made at 300 that people enjoy our esoteric segments, but sometimes they're just kind of over the heads of the listener. And while that's okay, we'd rather have you totally understand what we're talking about. So we decided to do kind of an intro to an intro and hopefully really define what esoterics is, its goals, its mission, what it encompasses, and then kind of relate that back to Freemasonry. So I think we did that, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. All right, guys, we're back. This is episode 302, and we're back on. We've got Frodero this week, and it's been a minute. Frodero and I were hanging out at a 300 event. If you were there, you met him, and it was cool, I'm sure. But we're back on the episode, and welcome back.
Great to be back. Yeah, for everyone I met at the 300, it was fun. And for the brothers who I didn't meet, I was the one that handed you your swag bag. So you might be able to put two and two together if you checked in early that day. So the 300 event was fun.
Awesome. While we were at the 300 event, it was really great to talk with folks, and we were able to hear about some of the interesting things that you liked about the show and some of the things that maybe you wanted explained more. And so one brother actually said that he would still like to get almost like an intro or an introduction to an introduction, right? So like go even more beginner. And we were going to do almost like a pop culture episode on esoterics where we touched on some different things, but if we can get you on board with some of the esoteric concepts even before we do something like that, it might be even more beneficial and more fun later. So I think that's what we're going to do this week is talk a little bit about like very basic esoteric concepts. And hopefully this will aid and assist the brothers out there who might hear us, once in a while and go, man, it sounds neat, but I'm still not putting two and two together. And that's totally fine. These are concepts that are, the fact that we even talk about them and study them at our age is not even really recommended. A lot of esoteric schools talk about having to be 40 years old, case in point, the Kabbalah, before you even touch it. So it's not something that is surprising that some people have just a harder time grasping some of what we're talking about. So that's going to be the episode. And I think what we could do to start it off is to first talk a little bit about esoteric as in what it is. And it should, like, of course, we've talked about esoteric and we've said, well, there's exoteric and there's esoteric, internal and external. And the esoteric refers to the internal. This is the idea, like at the baseline, that we are doing the work that we say we're doing in the lodge. We are working on ourselves. We are a quote-unquote living stone, and the esoteric concepts are ways to visualize the deeper meanings and some of the more spiritual practices that we can do as Freemasons, and that Freemasonry promotes these ideas. But again, they are buried in the ritual because they are really not truly meant for everybody. And not that they're not meant for those who can't understand. They are meant for those who strive to understand. So in that, I think that kind of establishes a pretty good baseline. Is there anything you would add, Froder?
Yeah, just like two other words that kind of go into the whole ideology of esotericism would be the word occult OCCULT. And that's a term that gets thrown around a lot. And there's dogmas. That term can be pretty scary. And so if we get just into the simple translation of occult, that is the Latin translation for secret. That's all it is. And the esoteric, the Webster Dictionary definition just gets down to the ideology or just the ideas of secrets held to by a few people. But also the word too, arcane. That you find that when you get into Western mysticism, the word arcane kind of gets brought in as well with esotericism. Again, it refers to the same exact word as esotericism or esoteric. And we're going to kind of just give a simple intro, like RJ said, and just kind of getting into the basics. So RJ, where would you like to begin on the smorgasbord?
So I think the first place we could go is to talk about the goal of the esoteric teaching. What is the goal? What is the finish line? What is the end and the means? This has esoteric practices or occult practices, right? The main goal is very, I guess I would say, fairly common now to hear the phrase, many paths, one mountain, right? Or, there's a million spokes, they all lead to the center. And those are ideas that stem from Buddhism. And not that Masonry or esoterics is a Buddhist thing, but it does articulate the goal per se. So the esoteric practices, like if we want to really think, if you're a Catholic and you believe in some of what I would call the spiritual magical practices, right? Like, because that's what there are, those things in Catholicism very heavily, actually. For instance, the communion and the idea of transubstantiation. This is a real thing. It is symbolic, and it helps you internalize that idea. So that internal process is an esoteric practice. You can take this in many different religious paths. Now, religion doesn't always have to be a part of esoterics, but many times it is, because within the confines of the spiritual experience of a person, you necessarily are looking for perhaps the path to God, or the path to what the Gnostic Christians would call the pleroma, where the one true God lives. Or perhaps you believe in the plurality, the Elohim, and you want to be able to view them or to become one or walk with them, like maybe this idea that Enoch or Zarathustra or whatever it may be. Like, the goal is to ascend. And the famous painting of Washington that they talk about in several books, Dan Brown talks about it also, the apotheosis of Washington, where Washington is on the dome of the Capitol and he's in there and he's like a god on the ceiling, surrounded by this beautiful scenery. And so this is the goal, but also the goal, whatever that definition is for you, whether that's God or getting to the source or the pleroma, whatever that is a mindset for you. So for some, it may just be enlightenment.
You threw a lot of terms out there from a lot of different dogmas, and for the average individual who's not educated as well as you are, that are familiar with these ideologies or these allegories, let's take it a step down, just even simpler.
Sure.
Just the ideology, or just the whole idea of truth. And so you used the word God, and we're going to use the ideology of religion, step and look at it through the lens of Masonry. So all these are dogmas. And the term dogma, these are just views of lenses through another system or another ego or an individual. And when you get down to the simplicity of all religions and all philosophical debates, or even science, so to speak, or esoteric, or all these secret societies, it's in the pursuit of truth. That's the fundamental fact. Will we both agree with that?
I would agree.
Yeah. So the fundamental facts of truth and the pursuit of truth. And what is truth? And the ideology of truth is a journey that you alone as an individual has to take. And no one can spoon feed it to you. They can show you the way, they can point you the way, they can tell you the way, they can tell you about the people that have taken the way in the past and what they did. But this is a journey for you alone of self-discovery, of finding out who you are and what truth is, and then maybe what God is, or what you said, the pleroma, or what is the definition of God, or what is the universe. Whatever that ideology you subscribe to, this is what the ideology, the whole idea of the path of enlightenment, or the path of finding what truth is. Now, we said enlightenment a few times. Now, enlightenment's an interesting term. It gets thrown around a lot in a lot of new age cultures and a lot of podcasts and books, and it gets thrown around a lot. And I'm curious to hear if you want to chip away with it, RJ, of what you think, or what your definition, your personal definition of enlightenment.
So I think in the broadest sense, enlightenment is more than the destination. It is becoming the destination. So I would define it as becoming one with the source, whatever the source is. There's the thought that, of course, we are the universe already experiencing itself through individual conscious thought. And when you die, you wake up. There are myths out there that define the human existence as you are some God being, and your punishment in birth is to immediately fall asleep before you wake up. And the time that you're asleep is your time here. And so when you actually wake up, you wake up in the pleroma, or the God realm. You then reabsorb, you re-enter the beginning, the source, whatever you want to call it. And I would say the enlightenment is likely to be either the blending or the amalgamation of you and the source, or whatever that is, or it is the conscious revelation once you're not in this body anymore, and maybe you remember your existence on Earth. So there could be something to that as well. But of course I don't know. I've never died and gone and come back that I can talk to you about. So
that's an important thing to be able to say. I don't know. You can have an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Confucius said it best: if you don't know, you already know a lot.
Yeah.
And agree with you. I don't know. It's like that Hindu allegory of 5 blind men and the elephant we've used in the show many times. And if you're a first-time listener, it's pretty simple. This wise sage takes 5 blind men around the elephant. They've never touched an elephant. Each are strategically placed around certain parts of the elephant. One's grabbing the trunk, one's grabbing the ear, one's grabbing the leg, one's grabbing the side. One's grabbing the tail, and the other one's grabbing another part. Each are touching a part of the elephant, which is true, but they're all having very unique experiences because they're grabbing a different part. And the same thing can be said for the pursuit of truth. And enlightenment's an interesting thing, and the whole idea. And if you guys are listening to this and you're going, well, how does this tie back to Masonry? Go with us. We're gonna tie it back to Masonry here towards the end of the show. And the Egyptian proverb, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, in the translation by Scholar R.A. de Briggs, he said, "The body is the house of man. Know thyself, and thou shall know the gods." That's interesting. So light is a very unique topic. So if you look at light, it's producing frequency, hertz, and vibration is everywhere. If you want to dive more, we did a strict episode on cymatics and vibration and sound about 2 years ago. And if you look at electricity, those are hertz. That's vibration. That's a frequency. Everything's vibrating. Cell phone waves, radio waves. There's so much beyond the 5 senses that we're experiencing that are all resonating on the frequency. They've proven that each gland produces energy and frequency. Everything has frequency. So case in point, your eyes, when you look somewhere, it actually produces a frequency. So what if there's more beyond the senses? And what if this vehicle, this meat suit that we're experiencing, has a more for you to experience beyond the senses? And when you start getting to know thyself, and you start to get into these deeper aspects that exist, you start to peel back these layers, and which has been referred to as consciousness, or it's been referred to as dimensions, so to speak, in many different cultures. So when you're able to, so to speak, dive deeper into the self and let go of the self, and let go of what's holding you on, and being in the present, that's important. So as Masons, we're taught living in the now, and the importance of equilibrium and the importance of balance. And there's a lot to be said about that. So just like simple psychology or just emotions, when you're around someone who's negative, they seem to have like a gate to them. They seem to be pretty heavy. Emotionally, they're holding on to the past. And if you can go on for hours and study Eastern cult anatomy and maps and showing on how memories actually reside themselves and trauma resides themselves in the physical muscle tissue. And the idea of letting go of the past and being in the present and not holding on to what's keeping you here. It's a long-winded answer on enlightenment, but there's a whole lot more to this human experience than consumerism. There's a whole lot more to the human experience than the senses. And you're able to get to there by learning just to quiet the mind and getting deeper into the self.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things that we mentioned, or you mentioned also, about going beyond the senses. This is the idea in the time before recorded history that people had a way to see more, feel more, hear more than what we do today. And one of the interesting stories that is out there, and it stems from the Bhagavad Gita, there were a few people, I think off the top of my head, maybe 12 or 10 people saw the true face of Krishna. And I'm trying to remember the story, and I really hope nobody yells at me here, but I want to say Arjuna is a guy who is warring against Krishna, and he then exposes himself to Arjuna, and this guy gets to see the true face of Krishna, the Lord Krishna. And it's like he peels back the material world to reveal only the spiritual world around him, and he sees like this, this bright face of this god creature. And this idea that the world around us is not exactly what it is, and our senses have to expand. We have to wake them up in order to achieve maybe or to get better at or improve our chances at enlightenment. And one of the interesting pieces that you can kind of draw on here is that through the ideas that we've talked about, like meditations really do, in practice, the more you practice them, the better you get at expanding kind of this consciousness, expanding your feelings for the outward world. And if you think I'm being hokey here, let me remind you that there is a world we don't see, and it's because we can't see it. And this is not science fiction. I've told the story before, and I'll tell it again right now, is that, for instance, anybody who's ever shot film on a regular film camera, you can do this, and if you just shoot digital, you can do this too. A couple of experiments. Go ahead and look at your remote control for your TV or your VCR, and you got a little light on your VCR remote. Go ahead and push one of the buttons or hold the buttons on the remote control and stare at the light. And you don't see anything. But if you then take your phone or some digital camera and you point the lens at the remote control and you push the button, you then see the blinking light that's coming through, because your phone captures the infrared technology. So you'll see this little flashing blue light. So we know the world of infrared is real, right? It's not just radio signal here. Now, where I'm going with this is that we know that material like light in our dimensional space bounces off of objects. The light then bounces off the object and bounces into our eyes. That's how we see them, and that's why you can reach out and touch somebody, gauging your depth perception. So the idea is that the light is creating, or it's giving you a spectrum of matter that you can see. And so what if you then look at it in an infrared light? So enter the world of 1970s photography. I can pull out my mom's Konica single lens reflex camera, and it has this little red dot on the side. And that red dot is actually for shooting infrared. What I do is I put the infrared film in there and I take a picture of something. But before I take a picture, I focus until it looks in focus. Great. Now, if I take a picture and I develop it, the infrared image is out of focus. Why? The little red dot on my camera is there to say, hey, now that you're in focus, move this red dot over like 2 spaces, and now I know it looks blurry, but when you take the picture, the infrared image, when developed, will be in focus. That's because the infrared image is literally 2 to 3 feet closer to you. So if we saw in infrared, would we actually be closer? You know, these are some really interesting ideas. I mean, science would just tell you no, right? Like you would reach through somebody before you touch them. And we would always have the illusion of reaching into somebody before we hit matter. But it should open your eyes to the fact that really multiple worlds are all around us. And going from that idea of like opening and expanding your mind. So this is the idea of like, I guess the process to get to enlightenment is being able to open these doorways. So how do we then take this stuff and say it's Masonic?
Well, before I answer that question, I just want to piggyback off of what you talked about a little bit. And, as a case in point, the invisible, I mean, right now, as you're listening to the show, if you're listening to it on your cell phone, there's cell phone waves, and 4G and 5G and 3G and analog signals and radio waves going on all around you, and Wi-Fi X-rays that are coming from the sun that you can't see. And what if your brain is a radio dial? Case in point, radio waves exist, but you need a receiver to tune in, and you're able to change the station on the tuner, you get a different channel because there's numerous channels out there. What if the same things with your mind? What if you're able to be able to change the radio dial and attract things? I mean, they've proven that your mind is producing 4 different waves right now: theta, delta, eta, and alpha. And you, by your thoughts, can change those at any moment's notice. Also on command, too, if you train the mind hard enough. Navy SEALs do it all the time. And if you get into ashram, India, or if you find yourself with Sufis and Swamis, they're able to do it as well. So just think about that right there. But to answer your question, in symbolism, nothing ever dies. Story can be preserved in symbolism. And, the many ancient cultures were really well aware of this for a very long period of time, about allegories and symbologies, and for the observer to interpret for themselves. It's funny, when you get into a lot of systems of religions or cults or dogmas or whatever it may be, when they're spoon-feeding you information, usually there's an ulterior agenda that's at play. And usually, instead of finding truth for yourself, they're usually having you worship someone. That's, it's an interesting system. Now, if you subscribe to these ideologies, I'm not judging you by any means. That's your path and that's your journey. These are just our perspectives and through our dogma and our ideologies. So getting back to Masonry only produces and only presents symbols for the candidate, you, the individual, to interpret for yourself. And that's a journey for you to take alone. You're told what it is, but it's really for you to dive a little bit deeper. You've kind of been spoon-fed a little bit of information, but there's truth's hidden directly in plain sight. I mean, how many times have you watched a movie and then you've done some serious internal work, or you've had some serious growth, you've gone through some really interesting chapters in your life. Here you are 5 years later, you're back looking at a painting, or you're back watching the same movie, and you see something completely different that's been hidden there the whole time.
Oh, yeah. So I saw the movie From Hell in the theater, and I watched it for the first time as a Mason about 3 years ago, and I was totally blown away. Now, Masonic concepts, okay, but really the occult studies, the things that Masonry, it kind of like, I imagine Masonry like this quilt with all these loose threads if you look real close. And if you decide to like start pulling on one of those threads, you kind of realize maybe this blanket's tied to this other blanket over here. Well, what's going on with this blanket, right? Like you just follow these different, you pull the thread and you see where it goes. And eventually, Masonry might be the tip of the umbrella, what gets you to go up the stalk and then travel down the umbrella all the way to the tips of these different metallic tip, the ribs of the umbrella. They have all these paths that lead all these different places. And that movie had some really interesting symbolism, and it was fantastic. I know you've mentioned Groundhog Day, which is another funny one.
Groundhog Day is a very interesting movie, as well as Brother Juan Zapova and I were talking intensely about Revolver, the movie that was done by Guy Ritchie. It's there's a lot hidden in plain sight. There's a lot there. And the same thing with Masonry. It's like, I think David Lynch, the famous movie producer, said it best in one of his commencement speeches. He's very well famously known for his movie Dune. And if you have a golf ball size consciousness when you look at something, you'll have a golf ball size understanding. And so the more internal work you do, the more you let go of what you're holding on to, and the more you let go and understand what the ego is and the self, the more you're going to be able to see things for how they are, not how you see it.
And it's really important, too, that when you're picking up some of these texts or when you're listening to something, whether it's this show or you're listening to a Cult of Personality or some other show, that we want to have an open mind. I remember a time when I was at work and I was reading a book and a gentleman walked by and he said, "What you reading?" And I told him I was reading Robert Bagent's Holy Blood, Holy Grail. And he said, "Well, what's that about?" And I told him, and he said, "Oh, that's hogwash." He's like, "That's blasphemous." He was a very deep-rooted Christian, and I respect that. And I said, "Yeah, it's a really interesting book, though." And he's like, "Well, he said something along the lines he'd never read it." And that's what I think some of our mistakes might be. There are things that I would say, I'm not really into that. I'm never going to read that, right? Which might be like a mystical Christian text. RJ, why won't you read that? Well, it's a Christian text. I don't want to read that stuff. It's not my thing. But I don't say that. I read that stuff. And I do it because I want to expand my knowledge and my consciousness in all areas. I like to study the different belief systems because I'm then able to understand more, and I see parallels and bridges and strings tied to everything. I can jump around in a philosophical religious conversation very easily. I can talk about Zarathustra, and then I'll talk about Jesus Christ, or I'll talk about Krishna, or whatever it might be. And it's really easy to do that when you understand these concepts, and then you can relate the stories and the allegories better. You then can blend that with ideas of psychology in the modern day interpretations done by Jung or even Freud. And when you're able to take these things and understand the symbolism and how the mind works and how we work and understand through stories, and we understand better through symbols than we do anything else. I mean, a recent study was quoted as, I'll paraphrase, something along the lines of, the idea of emojis on your phone is the most advanced written language ever created because it conveys everything in a sense. And people will scoff and say, that's, baloney. But this is science that measures brain activity, cognizance, understanding, and how people use it. Like, that's how it's measured. We're not saying, like, it took some brilliant guy to put a smiley face on a phone or a smiling turd on a phone, right? But the idea here is that it's a brilliant way to communicate, and it engages more than just basic words. It invokes an emotion, an idea, and it conveys a thought all in one, just like symbols do. You can go to any old bookstore, and if you're lucky, you might be able to find perhaps a reprint of an old symbol book, books that told stories, but there's no words. They're just different plates on the different pages that have these scenes or things happening, and you're like, oh, what is this? Well, to us, it's a picture, but to other people, they see a green lion and they instantly recognize the alchemical process, whatever. So, again, these kind of esoteric practices are what allow us to understand our deeper internal questions.
Man, you hit the nail on the head on numerous topics. Yeah, symbolism is very unique. And you mentioned Born in Blood, Robinson's book. And there's someone who's asking, has some questions about symbolism hidden in plain sight. Definitely check out The Pilgrim's Path by Robinson's book, his second book after Born in Blood. Check out the cover of that book and look hard. And if you can't see it, go back in, learn to quiet the mind, slow down, watch your breathing, pay attention to your breathing especially, and take a look again. If you don't see it just yet, then just focus on meditation. Learn to quiet the mind, learn just to be. Don't think to be, don't try to be, just be. Go back and look again. You'd be surprised to the untrained eye what's hidden directly there.
Absolutely. I remember a piece I read about the cover on that book, and I don't want to really talk too much about it because we would ruin this exercise for you. So here's your assignment, everybody. Sometime between now and, say, a couple weeks, I want you to do like a 5-minute meditation or 5 minutes of quiet time, reflect, and then study the image. And go ahead and go on the WCY page on Facebook, post your findings. We'll go ahead and maybe we can put them all together and we can kind of talk about it as a group or something, or we can address questions about some of that maybe in a later episode. But I think it'll be cool to see what you guys find and what you guys think when we do something like that. We can discuss things you've noticed, maybe positions of things or the layout of something. Whatever that might be, we can talk about it. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
We'll put a link in the show notes to the image as well. Now, I know we're getting towards the end here, but so how does the basics of enlightenment and the basics of truth and symbology, how does it tie to Masonry?
The idea of truth, which is the core tenet of everything, it's really the ultimate aim of everything, to know the truth, to be all-knowing, not no disrespect to the deity who is supposedly all-knowing, but to get there or to understand the philosophical questions of man. And I think it ties back to Masonry in this simple way, that we are a somewhat modern, initiatic experience, which should lead the initiate on a path. It should point some things out on the way, maybe like the 7 liberal arts and sciences, and teach them about some working tools and what they represent. But then it's up to that candidate to go ahead and dive a little bit deeper, right? Because we can do these things all the time, but if you're not going to walk the walk and do the work, it's just not going to work for you. And what's not going to work for you? The path, the way to understanding, to know a way in which you have then trained your mind, your body, and your soul, a way of being and living that increases the equity or increases the quality of your own personal life and existence. And to not only that effect, but to be able to affect those around you and increase the quality in their lives as well. And so we deal heavily with the idea of Solomon's Temple. Now, that's just our allegory. That's just our story that we tell. That's just the book that the secrets are in. It's no different, when explaining to the candidate, we say that the man is the living stone. Solomon's Temple is the human body. So when we build our moral temple or our physical temple to embody the ideals of Masonry, we then allow ourselves to live better lives, and that happens through the practice of our search for truth while using the working tools, while meditating. And when I say meditating, I don't mean you're sitting there, in the dark room doing your thing in some yoga studio. Your meditation might be sitting in your favorite chair at home and closing your eyes for 5 minutes as you not try to fall asleep, but clear your mind. Or work through your mind problems. Work through get rid of the thoughts that clouded you all day, your work thoughts, get rid of this, get rid of that, and be able to focus on nothing for a moment. It's impossible to do. You can't do it. But the idea that you're trying to do it is what's strengthening your mental ability. Eventually, you can work into traveling someplace in your mind and evoking feelings, or whatever the case might be. Guided meditations are great. We've talked about Hemisync a number of times, but whatever works. But it's important to do that work. Otherwise, it's just not going to work for you. You're not going to understand. It's going to be difficult.
Just to chime in here for a second, too, about meditation. If you're having a hard time thinking about clearing your mind because stuff's bothering you, there's a reason why it's bothering you. And the subconscious is very, very unique. And the mind is extremely complex. No way do we have all the answers. However, you might want to confront what's bugging you, why that situation keeps bubbling up, or maybe there's a reason why the same situation that keeps being repeated over and over and over. Maybe it's because if you're a Mason listening to this, you might not be using a certain working tool effectively, or you have failed to overlook possibly putting that working tool to work in your life. Now, we did a great 3 episodes going back about a year and a half on getting into each degree and kind of getting into the working tool. Now, if you haven't had a chance to go back, we recommend listening to those. However, if you have a degree coming up, stop and listen to the working tools that are presented. And when you're listening to those working tools that are being presented, think about how have you applied those working tools effectively in your life over the past day, past week, past month, the past year, or past how many years you've been a Mason. Take a hard look. And then once you realize you might not be, or you are, or how you can move forward, start applying that a little bit better, or tweak it here or there. And you might realize, geez, like case in point, like, man, those compasses, I was not using those at all. Man, now I'm looking at, there's a reason why this is happening. I'm going to try to apply this a little bit better. And you, again, to piggyback off what Robert says, and making yourself a little bit better as applying yourself and chipping away at the ashlers. And then we had this sidebar discussion over a few weeks ago on how when you're able to hewn your ashlar proper and right, and you fit your ashlar, a perfect brick, in the wall of humanity, and you take that 3rd degree working tool, which I'm not going to name, and you spread that very evenly, you realize that the bricks around you fit better. And those bricks are your friends, your family members, and then those bricks fit better, and it affects the sea of consciousness. It's like an ocean drop. A single drop does make a big difference, but it's up to you to do the work. And the importance of applying those and the symbology of taking those tools and applying them to the internal aspect of yourself.
Perfectly stated. I think it's a great place to end it, and I will definitely encourage everybody out there to check the show links. What we'll do is we make sure we have links to email Frodero, myself, if you have any questions about anything. If you're using the Podcast Source app, it's real easy. You can just tap on it. It'll open up your email, and boom, you can email us right away. And I look forward to answering any questions you guys have. By asking the question, you are ready for the answer. It's just a matter of doing the work when we give you the best answer we can give you. Now, esoteric questions are not like, hey, what's 2 plus 2? Well, 2 plus 2 is 4. So it's not a direct answer that way. There's going to be some open-ended questions. You can ask a question and we might have to ask a question back, like to help us focus on what you want to know, but definitely reach out if you need to, and we'll have some links to some of the things we talked about in the show, including the books, what to focus on, a couple links on some meditation techniques, perhaps.
We covered a lot. It was such a pleasure to be at the 300 event. Hats off to you guys at the Sonic Roundtable for putting on such a phenomenal event. A lot of hard working and effort and planning behind the scenes. It definitely all paid off. So it was a great event, and I look forward to the event next year.
Hey, it was our pleasure, and I can't thank you enough for helping us out, because without you and the other team members, we wouldn't have been able to do what we did. So many thanks, and as Frodder alluded to, probably some sort of event next year. We'll have to see how it goes. There was some talk about Chicago, which would be pretty sweet because it's up in my neck of the woods, but we'll see what happens. All right, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email us. And if you are interested in joining us in Peru, please send me a message or click that you're interested on the invite thing and we'll get you more details. And now I'd like to ask you all to support the program. And of course, we do that through our pin sales, and we've got a few extra items out there like money clips and tie bars. I think we only have one tie bar left, though. We also have some cufflink sets. So by purchasing those, you help support the program. We also have the Mason's Lady vinyl stickers for your car windows. For your ladies out there, if you're interested, they're pretty cool. It's just the heart says Mason's Lady. It's got the square and compass in there. We're selling those. The pre-sale is over, so those of you who bought them in the pre-sale to allow us to sell them, thank you very much. And the price went from $9 to $10, so that was the little bonus if you got it early. But we send those out $10, free shipping. That's covered inside the cost. There's no additional there. And also, we had some requests that people like to make donations to the show, and they've asked me in the past, can you please make an option to donate monthly? While I appreciated it, I felt that offering a monthly option would be, I didn't want to be pushy with asking for donations like that. But enough guys came forward and said, look, no, we want to do this because we're tired of going to your site every month and having to click donate, $5 or whatever it was. And so I do appreciate that, guys. So I did go ahead. I have two ways you can donate through PayPal now. So if you go to our website, wcypodcast.com, and you click support the show, you'll see there's two links. One says make a one-time donation. One says make a recurring donation. And we kind of labeled it so you can make a $2 donation every month and be a contributor. You can donate $5 a month and be a fellow, or you can be a producer at $10 a month. Again, all donations go right back into the show, and we highly appreciate it. You can click on the support the show tab, and then you'll click on where to shop, or you can click on make a direct donation. Either one of those, you'll be able to find that button. And it's also just on our homepage too. So if you go to wcypodcast.com, you scroll down and you'll see it says keeping the lights on, and then at the top make a one-time donation, and underneath that it says contributor, fellow, or producer, and you just choose your option, click subscribe, and then you'll be able to support the show that way. So I do appreciate everybody who had inquired about that. It means a lot to me that you guys are out there supporting this program, listener-supported Masonic education, and I really can't thank you enough for all that you guys do and allowing us to bring this program to you and everybody in the world. How do we measure? How do we know who we're reaching out there? And I can tell you just a few stats about the program that I think will allow all of you to understand the impact you all make when you support this show. So because you guys support this program, because you guys produce this program, you should all understand that we have reached 1.5 million people. That's pretty intense, especially for a niche podcast like ours on Freemasonry. Last month, we had over 60,000 downloads. It's pretty incredible. In every month, it will go up like by a couple thousand. So people are really spreading the word about the podcast, and I appreciate all of your work in doing that. So I just wanted to let you guys know that, just last month, again, 60,000 people downloaded the episodes, and we have over 1.5 million people who have listened to the program, whether those are unique signatures. So to put that in perspective, in the United States, we've got about 1.8, 1.9 million Masons. So if you just equated it to Masons only, more than half of all the Masons in the United States listen to the show. It's incredible. I mean, that's probably not an accurate statement because there are many men and women all over the world who listen to the program. And to just give you an idea of that, the United States makes up about 76% of our downloads, but Canada and United Kingdom, Australia, Germany, the United Arab Emirates, Philippines, Sweden, Japan, and the Netherlands are our top 10 places to listen to these. We're heard pretty much all over the place. We even have 242 downloads in Russia, and we've got, Finland, Sweden, Norway, even Iceland. Now, Greenland, I have 0 downloads. So, if you know a brother out in Greenland, get him to listen to the show. But pretty much the rest of the world. South Africa is huge. Again, thank you all for your support. I hope you don't mind me giving you some details and the data of where you allow this show to go. Next, I have a segment by Bill Hosler that he recorded for us, and I'd like to go into that right now.
Live from the secret crypt buried beneath the apprentice pillar of Rosalind Chapel. Welcome to Masonic Mythbusters with your host, Worshipful Bill Hosler. Please follow me.
Hello everyone, this is Bill Hostler coming to you with another exciting installment of Masonic Mythbusters. Brother Scott Duvall of Illinois writes, Worshipful Brother Bill, I can't tell you how many times I have been told Lord Baden-Powell was a Freemason. This is the first thing brothers tell me when they hear I am an Eagle Scout. Similar to the Forget-Me-Not, there is research stating that there is no evidence of Powell ever being initiated. Was he ever a Freemason? Well, Major General Lord Robert Stevenson Smythe Baden-Powell, the founder and first scout of Boy Scouts and the founder of the Girl Guides, Baden-Powell was born in February of 1857 in the Paddington section of London and passed away in January of 1941 in the country of Kenya. Sadly, Scott, the answer is no. After checking several sources, including the Midnight Freemasons' resident expert on everything scouting, Brother Greg Knott, each source stated there is no historical evidence to prove the claim of his membership. Even though he wasn't a member, Lord Powell must have had a belief in the good works of our order. According to the Grand Lodge of Columbia and Yukon's website, in 1931, Powell presented the first lodge to bear his name, Baden-Powell Lodge number 488 in Victoria, Australia, their volumes of sacred law, which they still use to this day. In the flyleaf of this book of law, he inscribed best wishes for the success of this lodge and its good work. Baden-Powell of Gilwell, 12th of May, 1931. It is also curious that Baden-Powell's grandson, David Michael Baden-Powell, was initiated into this very lodge, and the records of the lodge show that he served in the east of this lodge as its worshipful master. In total, there are 6 lodges in Australia named for Baden-Powell, all started by former scouts, not by the man himself. And in my opinion, these facts could lead one to believe in Powell's membership as a Freemason, even if that belief is erroneous. Every source I used to investigate for this piece stated that even though Baden-Powell was not a Freemason, he would have made an excellent one. Sadly, so many men are, with good intentions, labeled to have been Freemasons without any actual evidence for one reason or another. If you have a Masonic urban legend that you would like to see busted, you can contact me at my website, www.uponthesquare.com, or at my Facebook page, Bill Hostler PM. Until next time, this is Bill Hostler saying, may we ever meet upon the level and part upon the square.
Thank you for listening to Masonic Mythbusters with our host, Worshipful Brother Bill Hostler. Please come back again for another installment. You're always welcome here.
All right, again, I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions about that segment, please go ahead and email Brother Bill Hostler. His email address will be right in our show notes, but I believe it's bill@wcypodcast.com. And with that, we're going to close it out. So, again, questions, comments regarding anything in the episode, Peru, or anything else, shoot me an email at wcypodcast@gmail.com or at admin@wcypodcast.com. Please don't forget about our sponsors, guys like Brothers Blend Coffee, brothersblendcoffee.com. You can also check out Masonic Revival and Ryan Flynn, who has recently assisted us a little bit. So I do appreciate all of that. On It Labs, and of course, our big sponsor, BuyBankersBest.com, run by Brother Levi Banker right out of Missouri there, who's got some great products. If you use the promo code BBWCY357 at checkout, you're going to get 20% off. If you buy the flagship product of the program here, King Solomon's Reserve, either the beard balm or beard oil, 50% of the profits come right back to the show. And again, that's all thanks to the gracious contributions, Banker's Best and Levi Banker, the proprietor there, who is a brother. So with that, I will talk to you all next week. And until then, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.